Today we are having a hearing on the Biden administration's fiscal year 2022 budget request for the Department of Labor. Senator Blunt and I will each have an opening statement. Then I will introduce our witness, Secretary Walsh. After his testimony, senators will each have 5 minutes for a round of questions. While we are unable to have this hearing fully open to the public or media for in-person attendance, live video is available on our committee website, and if you need accommodations, including closed captioning, you can reach out to the committee of the Office of Congressional Accessibility Services. You know, a budget is a reflection of values, and through our hearings on President Biden's budget for the Department of Health and Human Services and the Department of Education, we've seen a welcome change in values from the previous administration, and the budget proposal for the Department of Labor is no exception. This budget is a message to workers across the country. President Biden is fighting for you. Workers are the backbone of our economy. When we invest in workers, in keeping them safe, strengthening their rights, providing pathways for their development, ensuring their financial security, and more, we are investing in a stronger economy and a country for everyone. And that's exactly what this budget, which proposes increasing funding for the Department of Labor by 14%, does. When it comes to worker safety, this past year has been a painful lesson on how important it is for every person to have a safe workplace. But even before the pandemic, our nation saw 5,000 workplace deaths a year, one every 99 minutes. And on-the-job deaths have disproportionately spiked for Black and Latino workers since 2016, increasing 8% and 25% respectively, compared to just 3% overall. And while we know the economic costs of these deaths, a substantial $250 billion a year, the loss to families is immeasurable. That's why the Occupational Safety and Health Administration was founded 50 years ago with a mission to protect worker health and safety. President Biden's budget would help us recommit to that mission by increasing OSHA's funding level by $73 million from last year, and that will help the agency hire more staff, provide more assistance to workers and businesses, hold employers accountable to providing safe, healthy workplaces, and ultimately save lives. In addition to protecting workers' lives, this budget also includes funding to protect their wages. It would provide $276.5 million to the Wage and Hour Division, an increase of $30 million. This agency investigates employer wage theft and illegal compensation practices used to cheat people out of their hard-earned wages, something which most commonly happens to women, workers of color, and foreign-born workers. The Wage and Hours Division recovers, on average, $1,120 per affected employee, and they do it with a staff of barely 1,300 people, covering 148 million workers at over 10 million workplaces. The funding in this budget would help them expand their capacity and put even more money back in the pockets of even more workers who've been cheated by their employer. And President Biden's budget not only invests in accountability for employers in our country, but also in accountability for our trading partners, so workers in Washington State or Missouri or across the country don't pay the price for unfair labor practices across the world. This budget increases funding for the International Labor Affairs Bureau by over a quarter, including $19.16 million for ILAB to expand monitoring and enforcement of worker rights under our trade agreements and preference programs, and critical new investments to fight forced labor and child labor. This budget also provides support to help workers struggling in light of the economic crisis caused by COVID-19, including the millions who've lost jobs, and especially women, workers of color, and others who've been most set back by it. President Biden's budget would increase funding for registered apprenticeships by $100 million, an increase well over half of what its budget was last year. These are proven apprenticeship models and lead to good-paying jobs in high-demand fields. Funding for them will help address longstanding inequities in apprenticeships and change the fact that women and workers of color are historically underrepresented in these apprenticeship programs and in the careers that they lead to. The budget would also increase funding throughout the workforce training system, including with a $203 million increase for workforce development state grants, which help states make investments in career pathways for youth and support adults and dislocated workers, including those most affected by the pandemic, and a new National Youth Employment Program and Veterans Clean Energy Training Initiative. Secretary Walsh, I look forward to hearing more about your plans here. And finally, this budget includes funding to administer and improve state unemployment insurance systems. This COVID-19 pandemic made really clear what a lifeline that support can be and how outdated and inadequate some of our systems are. This budget would help modernize our unemployment insurance system and address vulnerabilities, inefficiencies, and other issues with processing these critical benefits so families can get the support they need faster. Of course, the need for better unemployment insurance systems, workforce training programs, and workplace safety are just a few of the many issues we have to tackle in the wake of this pandemic. If we want a stronger economy, if we want a stronger country, it all starts with stronger rights for workers. We also need to make sure workers are safe from pandemics, sexual assault and harassment, and more. We need to make sure workers have paid family, sick, and medical leave, quality, affordable child care, a livable minimum wage of $15 an hour without exceptions, and a secure retirement. We need to make sure workers are not disadvantaged by pay inequality. We need to address the inequities in our economy that makes things so much harder for women, workers of color, workers with disabilities, and others. And we need to defend and strengthen the right to form and join a union, a right which allows workers to secure better pay and benefits and safer working conditions. This budget is a bold step in the right direction, and my colleagues and I have proposed other steps as well. Secretary Walsh, I look forward to working with you and President Biden in the months ahead to support workers in our country. With that, I will turn it over to Senator Blunt for his opening statement.
Thank you, Senator Murray. Good morning, Secretary Walsh. Welcome to the committee. I look forward to your testimony today and the chance to talk about the department's budget request for the coming year. You know, the past 18 months have been challenging for our country. The COVID-19 pandemic put unprecedented strain on the economy, on its workforce, and on families who suddenly were dealing with issues they hadn't expected to deal with and families hadn't dealt with in the same way before. Prior to the COVID-19 public health emergency declaration, the unemployment rate was 3.5%. That was the lowest since the late 1960s. I think you have to assume from that some of the things that we're doing that were different were making a difference. But at the height of the pandemic, in April of 2020, our unemployment rate exceeded 14%. While we've made great strides in bringing our unemployment rate back down since that point, I'm concerned we won't reach the 3.5% pre-pandemic number due to, frankly, some misguided federal policies, specifically the additional $300 in federal supplemental unemployment payments have unintentionally incentivized unemployed individuals to remain exactly that, unemployed. In May of this year, the average weekly unemployment check in the country was $318. That's a bigger check than a lot of people had taken home before, and you didn't have the expenses of going to work. And so, frankly, a lot of people did not go to work. While businesses in America have been searching for workers, this benefit has really misaligned the workforce needs across the nation. In Missouri recently, I continue to see help wanted signs all across the state. In my hometown of Springfield, these help wanted signs often included hiring bonuses and pay well above the $10.30 minimum wage in our state. Missouri, like many states across the country, has decided to end the federal supplemental payment to increase the level of participation in the economy. I believe that's beginning to work, but I also believe it's now time for Congress to recognize the importance of balancing providing a safety net when you need it and ensuring that our labor needs are met. We need to create an environment for Americans to thrive where people want to go back to work, where they're encouraged to go back to work, and where people who can't go back to work have a basic unemployment benefit. However, I'm concerned that some of the components of the department's budget request, and particularly some of the increases, don't consider this or the very real needs of local communities and the needs for a workforce to be more actively engaged. Really, too much of this budget is driven by the politics of the administration. Now, every administration should and has every reason to make some changes. I think this budget makes way too many changes in way too short a time. For example, instead of focusing funding on flexible workforce training determined by states to meet their own unique employment needs, the administration's tying training funds in many cases to green jobs. I'm not opposed to green jobs. I'm just opposed to the federal government deciding how states approach the needs they have right now. According to the analysis of the U.S. Energy and Employment Report and the Department of Labor's Bureau of Labor Statistics, when compared to jobs in fossil fuels, jobs in solar and wind power employ a larger share of individuals in their construction rather than more permanent roles as plant managers and other jobs. These jobs don't pay enough and are unionized at lower rates. Mr. Secretary, I agree with you, and we've talked about this, that we really need to target funding to the workforce of the future. However, I think it's unlikely that the federal government alone will be able to figure out what that workforce of the future should look like, and we need to have more involvement from states, communities, and local economies. Now, we're going to disagree on some things in this budget, but I'm encouraged to see things we are going to agree on. For instance, the increase in the apprenticeship program. I think this has been and needs to continue to be a successful tool to allow workers to get paid while they train, and frankly, to find out as early as possible if what they think they want to do isn't meeting their expectations, so they don't get way too far down the line before they realize this is not what I want to do. This budget supports programs that are targeted to the hardest hit parts of the country. For instance, the Appalachian and the lower Mississippi Delta regions have challenges there, and I think your budget does what it needs to begin to allow us to look at those challenges. There's support here for veterans transitioning to civilian workforce, one of the key priorities of this committee and I think of this Congress. Mr. Secretary, we're in a challenging environment. It's going to be a difficult year. I believe we can work toward consensus with the department's budget. But frankly, as I've said at our other budget hearings this year, I think this can only be achieved by more parity between the defense and non-defense funding. The president's budget request didn't achieve that goal. However, I remain confident that the final appropriations bill will. And Mr. Secretary, I'm glad that you're planning to be in St. Louis tomorrow. I know we were told yesterday a couple of the things you'd be talking about. One, promoting vaccines, and the other, the Job Corps. On the vaccine front, I was talking about this at our leadership stakeout yesterday. I've talked about it, I think, in every event I've been in Missouri since we started the warp speed effort to try to get these vaccines available more quickly. Vaccines are an absolutely necessary part of us creating an environment where this virus can't continue to replicate itself and change in new ways, and the variants are going to be the future enemy. Vaccine is the answer to those variants. On Job Corps, Senator Murray and I and the committee have worked together the last 6 years to increase that funding. I know those programs continue to be programs that we can do more with and can look for reforms in, and I look forward to your leadership in that area. So again, thank you for your time here today. I look forward to working together as we try to be sure that Americans' working families have the opportunities they need and that our economy continues to grow. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. With that, we'll turn to Secretary Walsh. Welcome to our committee, and you may begin your testimony.
Thank you very much, Chairwoman Murray. I appreciate it. And Ranking Member Blunt and the members of the subcommittee, thank you for having me today. I look forward to outlining the Biden-Harris administration's version of the Department of Labor's fiscal 22 budget and beyond. And I'm excited to be here in person. This is my second in-person hearing. My first was my confirmation. So if I make some mistakes, bear with me till I get used to this process. So I truly appreciate it. I want to just start by saying how humbled and honored I am to be here as the son of Irish immigrants and a member. My father was a member of the Laborers Union in Boston to lead the Department of Labor, just to think about their journey to America and having their son sitting in front of Congress, in front of the Senate today. I also believe, as the President says, we are at an inflection point in our nation's history right now. We're coming out, as was mentioned a couple of times, of a pandemic that has taken over 600,000 American lives, and it has pushed working people to the breaking point in so many different ways, in so many different corners of our country. The President and Congress worked together to pass the American Rescue Plan. It changed the course of the pandemic. It delivered relief to the American people, and it certainly set us on a pathway to recovery. At the Department of Labor, the team over there is working hard to implement this plan, from strengthening our unemployment systems to fully subsidizing the COBRA premiums to protecting workers' health and safety. But there's certainly much more work to be done. We need to build back better. That means putting workers at the center of a more resilient, more inclusive, and ultimately more competitive economy as a country. That's what the President's economic vision is all about. The bipartisan infrastructure framework negotiated with members of the Senate would rebuild our communities and create millions of good jobs all across this country. And the Build Back Better agenda would make historic investments in working people through job training and education, which I think we can all agree on, the CARES economy and paid family leave and medical leave, and workers' rights and protections. Building on that vision, the Department of Labor's fiscal 22 budget request proposes an investment of $14.2 billion. That's, as the Chairwoman mentioned, a 14% increase over 2021 enacted levels. That includes $3.7 billion in Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Acts and the Wagner-Pizer State Formula Grants. It's an increase of 6%. That's about creating more pathways to good-paying jobs for workers who need them the most, and we've seen it with people unemployed now and underemployed, the opportunity to make those investments. This budget also would invest $285 million in registered apprenticeship programs. That's an increase of $100 million. That would allow us to expand and diversify a model of economic mobility that is proven to produce results for both workers and employers all across this country. For unemployment insurance, we would fully fund and update the formula for what states receive to administer UI. It's the first update, quite honestly, in decades. We also request $100 million for technology solutions to prevent fraud and ensure access to UI benefits for all people that need them. For our worker protection agencies, this budget requests $2.1 billion, a 17% increase. We need to rebuild and strengthen our capacity to protect workers, wages, benefits, and rights and safety on the job sites. This budget also requests $100 million for multi-agency Power Plus initiative. This is aimed at empowering displaced workers in coal communities with new skills and new job opportunities. It requests $20 million for a new program to help veterans. The ranking member mentioned this. It transitions services for members and military spouses to get good careers in clean energy. It was developed with the Department of Labor's Department of Veterans Affairs. Across the Department of Labor's work, this budget invests in those who have been shut out of economic opportunities in the past, from women and people of color to rural Americans and veterans to at-risk youth, justice-involved adults, and people with disabilities. The pandemic proved that the systems failing some workers end up failing all workers and failing our country ultimately. But we have an opportunity to do better now coming out of the pandemic. We can empower all American working people. It's a moment in history when we need to move forward together. We need to come together. Madam Chairwoman, Ranking Member, thank you for the opportunity. I know that we have many more conversations and we'll work together to support the economic recovery that works for all American workers. I look forward to discussing our budget proposals and requests with you, the committee, today, and I'm happy to respond to any questions that you have. And if I do not have an answer to your question, I guarantee you our team will get back to you in the next couple of days with questions answered that we might not have today. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. We will now begin a round of 5-minute questions. Of our witness, I ask our colleagues to please keep track of your clock and stay within your allotted time. I appreciate that the budget addresses the need to rebuild and strengthen the capacity of the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. Under the previous administration, OSHA didn't do more than issue non-binding guidance on how employers could protect workers from COVID-19, and that left a lot of workers exposed as we witnessed thousands of deaths and illnesses of workers in healthcare and meatpacking and other essential industries. Now, the Biden administration recently issued an emergency temporary standard, but it does not yet cover all frontline workers. And as you know, OSHA received $100 million in the American Rescue Plan, which it plans to use to support more than 80 compliance and safety health officers, among some other priorities. But as the economy continues to reopen and more contagious COVID variants emerge, workers need OSHA to be fully engaged in its job of making sure employers provide a safe workplace for their employees and their workers. So I wanted you to describe for the committee this morning your plans to use those ARP funds to hire the staff OSHA needs to do its job, and how quickly do you expect to get these staff on the job?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. OSHA is one of the areas that when I was sworn in, work had already begun there due to the help of the American Rescue Plan and investments in staffing up. They were severely understaffed to be able to make sure that we keep our workplaces safe in America. Certainly would have a difficult time keeping up with the average volume of business, but if you throw COVID-19 and the atrocities of some of the workplaces in our country with COVID-19, it made it very complicated. We are currently in the process of hiring up and staffing up in OSHA so that we can have more inspectors to go out to job sites. Quite honestly, I would love OSHA at some point, we're asking for an increase in this budget, I would love OSHA at some point to get to a point where we're not responding to accidents on the job site, that we're actually being proactive, working with businesses, and how do we create better, safer work conditions and work sites. We're not at that point right now, so we're at the point where we're still looking to staff up and hire up, and also and I've spent many hours on Zooms with the OSHA employees across the country, just thanking them for their work, because throughout the pandemic, OSHA employees went to work every day. They didn't have the luxury of sitting home on a Zoom and doing their job. They had to be on a job site, they had to be touring facilities, and they had to see some of the toughest situations out there. So I look forward to working with this committee and continuing the staffing up of OSHA.
Well, the budget requests an increase of $73 million for OSHA in fiscal year 2022. Can you describe why those funds are needed in addition to the ARP funds that were provided? Yeah,
because thank you. What the ARP funds does, it restores us back to where we were pre 5 years ago. What the new funds allow us the opportunity to do is expand the office and to get into some of the other work that we want to do. Businesses should not look at OSHA as a burden. People should be looking at OSHA as a partner and being able to create opportunities to create safe work environments. When I was a young person working on construction sites and OSHA came on the job, they would come on the job to investigate, but they weren't investigating after an accident happened. They weren't investigating after a tragedy happened. They were making sure that there were proper procedures in place there to make sure that workplaces are safe. We need to do work around this country to make sure that our workplaces are safe, that workers are safe, and that we collectively work with businesses as well as we move forward here. So that additional revenue will go into continuing to hire up in OSHA and to create better opportunities for training and to have the best prepared OSHA inspectors we have in the country.
Yeah, you didn't mention whistleblower complaints, but I understand that last year the Inspector General reported a significant increase in complaints and insufficient staff to investigate those complaints. What are you going to do to address that issue?
Yeah, again, it's about the staffing. I might have the numbers wrong. Let me just get the numbers here for you. We are going to double the number of inspectors by the end of the administration. The first administration, Biden-Harris administration, the first term. We were at about 360 inspectors in the country, inspecting about 170 million workers in our country. That certainly is not going to do the job. So what we're doing here is making sure that we have enough inspectors out there that when an employee calls the office with a complaint, we're able to respond to that and not have it sit in a pile or sit in an inbox somewhere. And again, it's about, when you think about whether it's OSHA or Wage and Hour, the Department of Labor is down about 3,000 employees where it was 4 years ago. And when you're down employees in the Department of Labor is an agency, as you know, that is out there in protecting workers. If we don't have the staff and don't have the employees to protect the workers, then we can't be on the job sites, we can't be checking wage and hour, we can't be making sure people are working in safe conditions. So our intention with this investment that we're asking for today, and with the intention of the American Rescue Plan, to staff back up, to build back pre-4 years ago level, but also enhance that.
Okay, I have a number of other questions, and I'm going to ask them at the end, so other committee members can have their time. I'll turn to Senator Blunt.
Thank you, Chair. Let me start with a question that's really going to be more of a question I'll follow up with later, but I want to be sure we cover this. You and I have talked about this before, Secretary, the idea that people don't get the information they need early enough to decide what kind of job is out there, what their personal sense of job satisfaction would be, and what those jobs pay. A few years ago, I went with one of the Secretaries of Labor to the Carpenters Training Facility in St. Louis. And as we visited individually with people at the end of that visit, they were all in their late 20s. They all had a similar story, and it was sort of that lost decade of not knowing what they wanted to do or not having information about the importance of benefits, the importance of job satisfaction. And we've looked at that as sort of a lost decade that we'd like to avoid. It's hard to recover, frankly, from that lost decade. You asked for $10 million to continue to pursue that in your budget. The Secretary of Education didn't ask for the $10 million education had last year. We'd put $10 million in both budgets. At some point, when you've had time to think about this more, I'm going to ask you, and I'll be asking the Secretary, what the two of you are doing to try to close that gap between getting the information you need. If you want to talk about the importance of knowing what jobs are out there sooner rather than later, let me let you do that for a moment.
No, thank you, Ranking Member. And to be quite honest with you, I want to add another component to that, Secretary of Commerce. So the Secretary of Commerce, Gina Raimondo, the Secretary of Education, Secretary Cardona, and myself have had conversations. And when you think about the jobs of the future, the three of our departments catch employers and educational opportunities to prepare people for the future. So what we're doing is we're working collectively together to make the investments. Gina Raimondo's working with the business community as well as I am to find out where the gaps are, where they need employees now and in the future, working with education on how do we create those programs in our primary schools, in our high schools, how do we create those opportunities in community college moving forward. And the Department of Labor is offering, obviously has the workforce development grants and the workforce grants to be able to fund those jobs. So it really has to be real intentional work that we're doing here to make sure that this money that we're asking for today and the money to the rescue plan and potentially through the CARES economy plan, that this investment is preparing workers for the future. You just said it yourself. I mean, when you think back and look at the history of this country, and you look at the investments that have made in the 50s and 60s and 70s, lots of schools around America had voc tech schools, and they were doing voc tech training, and young people that were going to those programs were going into the trades. They would become an electrician, plumber, carpenter, laborer, mechanic, what have you. Many of those programs are very different today. And I think we're at a moment in time coming out of a pandemic, or getting through a pandemic, I should say, we're not out of it yet, that we have an opportunity right now to retrain and reskill workers, young people, as well as some older workers as well, into those careers. But it has to be a coordinated effort. It has to be the secretaries, the Commerce, Labor, and Education, and it has to be Democrats and Republicans, quite honestly.
Right. All right. I'm going to run out of time here. I agree with that, but the component I want to be sure we continue to add is like those VOTEC programs. I was at a great new facility in Buffalo, Missouri the other day that they're building, and being focused again. People need to know sooner rather than later what jobs are out there, what those jobs pay. A lot of jobs that have that kind of training are actually produce greater satisfaction and more income than jobs that take a college that you have a college degree for. And sharing all that information early is important. One way to create an early sense of what you want to do is apprenticeships. Missouri, where you'll be tomorrow, is ranked second in the United States in apprenticeships. We're working toward a goal in our state of having 20,000 active apprenticeships by 2025. The one thing left out of that, it appears to be the non-traditional industries and what we can do to develop apprenticeships outside of the well-run trade union programs and other programs for things, for instance, like healthcare, cybersecurity, even finance. What can we be doing to think about how we expand that apprenticeship opportunity to new fields?
Well, what I've been doing and what we're going to continue to do is talk to companies, tech companies as well. We have opportunities in tech and biotech and high tech and even pharmaceuticals. So having conversations with those industries on how do we create pathways into those industries would be important. Those are good paying jobs, and they're looking for people. And quite honestly, we have a huge opportunity right now in this country to really think about those apprenticeships and how do we create more apprenticeships. And the beauty is, I know my time is over, the beauty is the apprenticeships, you're paying while you're learning. And that's the difference between workforce development, job training. You're actually getting paid in an apprenticeship while you're learning on the job. Right. And that allows a person that might be unemployed or underemployed right now to get on-job experience, real-life experience moving forward.
Thank you, Secretary. I'll have some more questions also later, Chairman, and thank you for the time.
Thank you. Senator Reid.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman, and congratulations, Secretary Walsh. Glad you're there in the department. Let me raise a first question about the short-term compensation program, or otherwise known as work sharing. After the last recession in 2010-29, estimated that we saved 570,000 jobs. And I know Congress and the Biden administration stepped up and they're providing fiscal support for this program. And it is saving tens of thousands of jobs. And as you know, what it does is it basically provides 1 or 2 days of unemployment compensation while the individual works at the facility. Can you explain how you, and if you will continue to support this program and try to extend it to every state in the union?
Yeah, thank you very much, Senator, and thank you for raising this issue. Work sharing certainly is an important and innovative tool. I agree with you that I wish that we had seen it across the states, and we want to see it across the states. I think it's going to be very important for the future of our workforce. It's important that we continue to explore that. I'm going to, as Secretary of Labor, and our department is. The department is certainly committed to promoting state adaptation of this program, and we're going to continue to find ways to increase awareness and participation in the program. You've seen the benefit of it, and I think that, and workers have seen the benefit of it, and I think that there's opportunities for us throughout the United States of America, for other states and other workers, more honestly, to see the benefit as well. So I know that Rhode Island, you've been a leader on this, and I want you to know that I want to continue to work with you and maybe some of the other members of the Senate and governors, quite honestly, around the country to expand the program.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Switching gears a bit, I secured about $28 million on the defense appropriations bill for submarine industrial base support of workers and of training and education initiatives. And I think you've seen one of these when you visited Westerly, Rhode Island, and saw our training program where our Department of Labor, together with Electric Boat, collaborates. And I think this is another example of what Senator Blunt was getting at, this demand-driven model for training. It's not the old-fashioned, well, we turn out X, we've always done that. It's what does business need? And up in our place, Electric Boat over the next several years is going to have to hire 17,000 people, many of them machinists, welders, et cetera. So how are you going to continue to work with the Department of Defense to support programs like this and with other agencies to support demand-driven programs? Well,
first of all, thank you for your work on this. Ranking Member Blunt talked about this as well. I think first I want to say is that the jobs that you work with your hands are now computer jobs, meaning that you have to have not just the skill to be able to craftsperson with your hands, but you need to be able to learn and read off a computer because the work has gone so technical. The Department of Labor has just awarded the state of Rhode Island a $3.9 million grant to expand registered apprenticeship opportunities. I think that this is one of the areas that we have such a great opportunity. Electric Boat is a great example. I was in Connecticut. We went through Rhode Island to get to Connecticut. I know there's a facility in Rhode Island as well, and the expansion that was going on there and the opportunity for employees. I guess the best way I can sum it up is what I'm going to do about it is make sure that these investments are there and that we work with companies like Electric Boat, but the human side of it. When I was at Electric Boat, I was talking to a couple of apprentices. They were standing there next to me, and I got to talking with them, and I'm like, what are you doing? You know, did you go to college? One kid went to college for a little while, dropped out. It wasn't for him. I told him my story. I dropped out of college after a year and a half. He is now on a pathway to a career. He's on a pathway to working on submarines for the United States of America. He's on a pathway to doing some amazing work. He's proud of his work. He's happy what he does. He told me he's earning good money. He's making a living. He's able to raise a family. That's the type of stories that we need to continue to happen. So I think it's incumbent upon us. If I do anything as Secretary of Labor, it's making sure that the money in the workforce development grants and the apprentice program money that we get out in the street. Because that is going to be the fundamental biggest game changer in this United States of America, to get workers retrained or workers trained and the ability to raise and get into the middle class. That's what we can do. That's the one thing. If I accomplish anything and I do that, I'll be happy.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. Just a final point, not a question, is sitting down with adult educators in Rhode Island a few weeks ago, they pointed out that one of the problems is literacy, that they have a significant number of adults who walk in and they want jobs, they want to work, but they have very poor literacy and very poor numeracy too, digital skills. And I'll just, not with a question, but I assume, and I know you will follow up with the Department of Education to try to collaborate to see how we can integrate our literacy programs as well as our training programs, and I will then. I won't follow up with additional questions. I'll just thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Secretary, welcome. I agree with you, by the way, for what it's worth, about getting the money out on the streets, literally. See, I'm looking at your budget here. Your current budget's $12.5 billion. You're asking for $14.2 billion. Does that sound about right?
Yeah.
That's a 14% increase. You want an extra $1.7 billion.
Yeah.
Okay. Explain to me why the American people would be better off giving you $1.7 billion than taking that $1.7 billion and spending it on infrastructure. I did a little math, and for $1.7 billion, we can resurface a 4-lane highway from Washington to Denver. So why are the American people better off giving you more money than putting it on infrastructure?
Well, thank you very much, Senator, and thank you for the question. It's a great question, and I think the way I would think about it is the $1.7 billion increase to the budget, my budget, is an investment in infrastructure as well. It's an infrastructure.
It's what? I'm sorry?
Infrastructure investment as well. It's an infrastructure investment in the American worker in this country. It's an opportunity for us to look at, as I think about the Department of Labor.
Well, do you believe excuse me for interrupting, I'm sorry, Mr. Secretary, we don't have much time. Do you believe that every expenditure by the federal government is an investment? What's the difference between an investment and an expenditure?
An investment is an investment in the future of workers. An expenditure is an expenditure in building a bridge.
Okay. Well, if you have a union background, which I respect and admire, if we took $1.7 billion that you say you need more to run your department, and we spent that on infrastructure, that's going to create a lot of union jobs, isn't it?
It's going to create a lot of jobs, but we're also not going to be able to educate the workforce that needs those new jobs that are going to be created off of that infrastructure investment of new bridges.
But they're already educated. The people building the roads are already educated. They're good at what they do.
Well, Senator Reid just mentioned of an issue around literacy in this country. So, again, it's an investment in helping people to be able to be retrained and trained in the jobs of the future. I come out of construction. I worked construction as well. The construction industry that I worked on in the early 90s and late 90s is different than the construction industry of today.
Yes, sir. Let me stop you for a second. I don't want to get too far afield here into a history of the construction industry. I used to work construction too. Let me be sure I understand what you're saying. When my constituents call me and they say, look, you're being asked to raise taxes to pay for infrastructure, why, instead of putting $1.7 billion in extra taxes on us, Why'd you give $1.7 billion to the Department of Labor? Why didn't you use that for infrastructure? Am I just supposed to say because the Department of Labor says they're going to make an investment? What metrics are you going to use this time next year to be able to prove to this Congress that your investment paid off better than $1.7 billion in infrastructure?
Well, before I answer that, let me just quickly go back to the tax question. I think the beauty for your constituents is that the infrastructure bills that's being negotiated right now does not raise taxes on the average American who earns under $400,000. So the average American is not paying for that.
That's not true.
Okay, well, that's not why I'm here
We just have to agree to disagree. Let me move on because I've got 1 minute left and I like to stay within my time. Does your agency conduct surveys?
As far as employee surveys?
Any surveys?
We do, yes.
Okay. Do you pay people?
Pay the people to do the surveys?
No, to take the survey.
I actually don't know the answer to that.
Well, here's what I'm asking. I'm not.
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
I need your help finding something out. One of my constituents got this in the mail. It's a letter. I know it's not under your jurisdiction from the Census Bureau, and they asked him to fill out a form on children's health. And he opened it up, and look what fell out: a $5 bill. And there's no reference in the letter to the $5 in cash he got from the federal government. What's this all about?
I have no idea.
Can you help me find out?
I will help you find out.
I
didn't get one of those letters.
Well, I filled out my census, my survey. I want $5. And I understand that the Biden administration is also sending people $40 gift cards.
I doubt that's from the Biden administration, but I will look into it.
I looked it up. It's on the internet. It must be true.
I will look into it for you, my friend.
Would you?
I promise.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
All right, sir.
Senator Shaheen.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and congratulations, Mr. Secretary. We are delighted to have you in your current role, and it's nice to have a New Englander who I can understand. And you were talking earlier about the need to have more non-traditional apprenticeships and the potential for doing that, for organizations to make that possible. One of those organizations in New Hampshire is the Job Corps, where they have a number of apprentice or training programs that train people for healthcare roles, for dental assistants, for some of the things that have been non-traditional. Can you speak to the importance of the Job Corps and why it's a great opportunity for young people who may not have another alternative?
Absolutely, Senator. Thank you for that. Prior to my being here, I did not have, per se, a Job Corps center in the city of Boston, but we had lots of workforce development programs. My first Job Corps visit was in Memphis, Tennessee, where I got a chance to tour the Job Corps facility there, and I saw firsthand the unbelievable potential of creating pathways for so many young people in America. And then I started to look into it and realize the amount of young people that go through Job Corps. Job Corps, there is no question in my mind that everybody today who brought up a question to me so far, Job Corps should be a mainstay in opportunity for economic development and job growth. I think that we need to continue. I'm going to continue to partner with Job Corps. I'm going to do everything I can. I've asked for a budget increase for Job Corps. I'm also going to do everything I can to make sure Job Corps all across this country are successful. I know your Job Corps in New Hampshire. I know it's successful, and we want to take those models and make it successful. So I'm spending, again, not to kind of get off the beaten path here, but I know when I became Secretary of Labor, people talk about OSHA, unemployment insurance, and all of the kind of the bigger ticket items. Job Corps is as important as any of these if we do it right and continue to create pathways.
Well, thank you. I worked for 20 years first as governor to get that Job Corps with a lot of other people who supported it. So it's really nice to see it be successful, and I appreciate the support from your support for Job Corps. Something that has not been so positive this year has been the challenges with finding workers in New Hampshire, as everyone has spoken to already. And one of those issues in New Hampshire has been the access for H-2B visa workers. You and I talked about this last spring, but we have a lot of seasonal businesses that rely on H-2B visa workers to fill those temporary jobs when we don't have workers in New Hampshire who are willing to take those jobs, and we have an unemployment rate that is now back to under 3%. Congress charged the Secretary of Homeland Security and you as Secretary of Labor with the responsibility of collaborating to determine the appropriate number of additional H-2B visas to release for this fiscal year. I was disappointed to see the administration's ultimate decision to release just 22,000 additional visas, and just 16,000 of those were set aside for returning workers. They were fully applied for less than 2 weeks after being made available. So can you tell us how the administration determined that 22,000 number and why only 16,000 of those should be available for returning workers?
Yeah, I did. I can. First and foremost, it was as somebody who was literally on the job about 3 weeks at that particular moment. I sat with Secretary Manorkas, and we were looking at different numbers. He had a very higher number, much higher number than that, and we were looking at the consistency of what the past practice has been and what the average number of additional visas have been. 22,000, 16,000 of the traditional ones is about the average of the last 3 years, not including last year, what the average was. The 6,000 that were added was for the Northern Triangle of Central America and Southern America. So we have made, my office and Homeland Security's office is coming up with a better formula for how we operate and move forward next year. And I think that certainly your office, I spoke to you directly, and Senator Hassan called me, and many senators from around the country called me as well, from all over the country, really concerned about this. We got the number out late. And so what we want to do now is prepare for next year as we move forward so this same thing doesn't happen. I know that in New Hampshire, Maine, and other places, the tourism industry is in desperate need of these workers. In other parts of the country, the fishing industry is desperate need of these workers. And then we're also looking at the H-1B program as well for the farmers. So I don't have a great answer for you how we came up with that number other than we sat down and had a compromise conversation. But I can tell you this, you have my commitment that next year we'll not be dealing with this at the last minute. We'll have this conversation beforehand, and maybe even an opportunity for me to visit with you and talk to some of the workers that are in your state to talk about the importance of that program.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I know I'm out of time, Madam Chair, but I would just remind us all that we are dealing with an aging workforce in this country. And if we expect to fill the jobs that we are creating, we need to get more older workers into the workplace, and we need to get more immigrants into the workplace. And I understand it's a charged political issue, but it's one we need to face if we're going to address our workforce shortage. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Bowen.
Thank you, Chair Murray. Secretary Walsh, I am going to join the chorus here as a big supporter of apprenticeship programs. And I plan to shortly reintroduce my apprenticeships legislation known as the Partners Act in the near future. That's focused particularly on collaboration between smaller work places and technical colleges and workforce boards to sometimes create novel apprenticeships, but to assist especially smaller businesses in standing up apprenticeship programs. Anyways, I was pleased to see that your budget requested a $100 million increase for apprenticeship programs, along with a commitment to increase access to apprenticeships for historically underrepresented groups. I wanted to call your attention to my home state of Wisconsin, where in Milwaukee we learned that the number of black apprentices decreased by nearly 22% over the last year. That's a deeply disturbing statistic. And so I am interested in learning how the department will use the appropriated funds to attract more racially diverse apprentices, and what strategies you have to prevent the sort of numbers that we've seen in Wisconsin and Milwaukee in particular.
No, thank you. I was in Milwaukee about 3 weeks ago with the mayor, and we were on a job site replacing lead pipes. They were replacing lead pipes in one of the neighborhoods in Milwaukee. And prior to that, I was at a roundtable with the building trades. I think that there's two things we have to do. Number one is I think the people that want to get access to these apprenticeship programs, they're there. People of color, African American, Latino, people want to get in. It's about you have to be real intentional about reaching out to the community and creating open door opportunities for these programs. I've done it in the city as the head of the building trades. I've done it as the mayor of the city of Boston, and I think that we have a unique opportunity right now at the Department of Labor. Equity is kind of at the core of everything that we're doing, and we need to make sure if we want to really come back and build back better, it has to be build back better for all people. It can't just be build back better for some communities. And so I think number one, to answer your question, at the Department of Labor, when we start to think about putting RFPs out, we start to expand these apprentice programs, we also have to put in some recommendations on how, and explain to people, how do you get people that don't have access to these programs access. So you just got to be intentional about it. Bottom line, I mean, in Boston, it's worked. I mean, are the numbers great? No. Are the numbers better? Yes. So we have to be better than we were.
During the pandemic, the Wisconsin's Department of Workforce Development really struggled to make timely unemployment insurance payments because of outdated computer systems. Yeah. And they were a product of years of neglect and, frankly, partisan attacks on the unemployment insurance program to begin with. I'm encouraged to see that your budget will provide, again, $100 million specifically for IT solutions that can be deployed in the state. And this money, I think, will be well spent in Wisconsin. But I was also interested in learning more about the first comprehensive update in decades to the formula that determines the funding states receive to administer unemployment. Can you provide more information on the proposed changes to the formula? And is this something that the department expects to undertake administratively, or do you think you're going to need changes to authorizing language?
Well, first of all, thank you for bringing this up, because as I was prepping for this hearing, most of my prep was around unemployment insurance. So I thank you for bringing it up. I think that a lot of what we can do, Department of Labor is going to be working with states and territories to be able to look at what investments are needed in those different areas. We're using the funds that through the American Rescue Plan to tackle the most acute problems that the systems have been facing for a long time. There's kind of four key priorities, which I'll touch upon. One is sending teams to states to provide intensive technical assistance. That's first and foremost, really finding out, because every state system is a little different on how they operate, and their computer systems are completely different. We're going to provide states with direct assistance and experts to learn about the challenges and to begin to help immediately on what we need to do. So that's one space. Second is a focus on ID verification and looking at in that area. A third is modernizing technology. Probably one of the biggest things that we have an issue with is technology. And states are running on incredibly antiquated systems that they've had for 30, 40, 50 years. And then a direct grant to states to help them solve the challenges that they have in the system. I mean, reforming the UI system will do a lot. Number one, as you mentioned at the very beginning, at the beginning of the pandemic, people had problems accessing the benefit. They couldn't get in. They were waiting in the Zoom. They were waiting in a line. They couldn't get through. So creating a platform, a system that somebody needs unemployment, they can either sign up online or get a phone call. They can get in. Number one. Number two, it's also the fraud piece of it. There was lots of organized crime and fraud with the UI system, where millions and billions of dollars were taken that should have gone to people. Again, that will address the fraud. So we're going to have a comprehensive approach moving forward. We're being very, very focused on how we administer this program and how we move forward.
Okay, and if you can follow up with some more information about the formula changes that are being undertaken, that would be great.
Yeah, I'll get that to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Secretary, the budget request includes significant increases in funding across the workforce development program. And like COVID itself, the economic impacts of the pandemic, as you know, have fallen disproportionately on the most vulnerable, including women, workers with low incomes, workers of color. So the investments in this budget would help our economic recovery, but also address changing workforce needs that were apparent actually long before COVID, such as the transition to clean energy and the development of other in-demand industries and sectors. Can you talk to us about why the increases in workforce development programs are so important right now, and specifically what this budget does to address inequities in our workforce programs?
Yeah, let me try and do a better job than the first time I was asked the question. Most people here today that have asked me a question have discussed either the underemployment of people or the lack of ability to get into a better paying job. What the pandemic, we've known this before the pandemic, but what the pandemic has really shown is that we are in a crossroad in our country, and we have an opportunity to create a platform for people to get into the middle class. President Biden's Build Back Better plan, not the plan, but Build Back Better, the words Build Back Better, when he talked about in the very beginning, before there was any plans associated with that, was about creating opportunities and pathways into the middle class, that people wouldn't have to live in poverty, people wouldn't have to worry about unemployment, people wouldn't have to worry about not having health care, not child care, daycare, education, all of that. And what our workforce investments are, what we're asking for in this budget, and what we want to do with our workforce investments in the Department of Labor in this budget, is to continue to advance what the President's agenda is, what we all want to do moving forward. And so for every dollar that we spent, with all due respect to one of the senators today, for every dollar that we spent in workforce development, it is an investment in the future of America's workforce. And it's an opportunity. Ranking Member Blunt mentioned about new emerging industries. Those industries right now, a lot of them are just for college graduates. They're going into cities like Boston and they're grabbing up college graduates, but they have more opportunities than they have people to work in those jobs. And when you talk to those CEOs and the people that create those companies, what they say is that we can train the workforces to work in those industries. We don't need to have a college degree or a PhD or a law degree. So we have a unique opportunity right now. So the investments that I'm asking this committee to support, and I'm going to be asking the full Senate and Congress to support, are investments we're making in the future of American workers. We don't want the same old Department of Labor where we're going to be giving grants to states and states will be taking the money and maybe doing something with it. What we want to do is make sure that these investments are going in the right places so that we can continue the opportunity to get your constituents, these would be my constituents, into good paying jobs. That's the opportunity in front of us at this particular moment in time. And I think that nobody wants to go back to the old way. I think it's important for us we continue to make investments in American people for those jobs.
Okay. There are workers around the country right now, as you well know, trying to support their families, make ends meet, but they're being denied the unacceptably low federal minimum wage, overtime pay, or both. And it's clear more needs to be done to ensure workers receive the wages that they actually earn. And it is the Wage and Hour Division's job, as you know, to investigate these cases and recover back wages and damages on their behalf. Can you talk to us about how your department would use the $30 million increase that you've requested for wage and hour to address wage theft and increase back pay recoveries, particularly for our vulnerable workers?
Yeah, first and foremost, I want to just thank you for the American Rescue Plan, because we've made some investments there as well in wage and hour, and we're building back up where we were previous levels. The investments that we want to invest there, again, it goes back to thinking about the Department of Labor in a different way. As far as the way I view the Department of Labor is, we represent workers in the morning, in the afternoon, and at night. And we represent workers in all different levels, whether it's security on the job site, safe retirement, safe working conditions. So what we want to do in wage and hour is make sure that we truly make an opportunity for people that are being shortchanged or not getting their wages that they earn and deserve, that we have the proper opportunity for investigation to go in and investigate any cases out there, so we're able to follow up and get people's back wages. If you look at the Department of Labor's website, every day we have another case where we're able to recoup benefits of people that lost their money.
Thank you, Senator Blunt.
Thank you, Chairman. The the President yesterday, on Friday rather, released an executive order that encourages the FTC to ban unnecessary occupational licensing restrictions. I've been particularly involved in that as it related to returning veterans who bring skills back with them, or veteran spouses who are or military spouses who are going from one state to the next. What are you doing, and what do you think we can do to encourage more cross-state collaboration in licensing and to eliminate needless barriers for licensing, particularly for those people who some way have either been in the military or have spouses in the military?
Yeah, I don't have a direct answer for you to that question, but my past understanding of being in the legislature or in the city of Boston as the mayor, it's a concern, because people would come to our city and they'd want to work in a certain industry, and the license was not recognized in the city of Boston, and there was an ability at the state level to get a waiver. But it's something that I don't have enough information on, and I will look into it. But I definitely think that, particularly military families, they're not in. I have a cousin that's in the Coast Guard. In the last 10 years, he spent time in San Diego, up in Portland, Maine. He's been all over the country because he gets shifted from base to base every 3 years. Right. So again, if he had a side career that had a license, he need to get that. So I'll work on that with you. I don't have the direct answer for you on that.
Let's work on that. I think the executive order clearly heads in the right direction, but let's work on what we can do now. That is largely a state and local determination. Up until this point, many of the states, including Missouri, are moving in the direction of making it much easier. I think our first military spouse that got an immediate license when she came to the state was a lawyer who, within a few days of moving to Missouri with her husband, who was at Fort Leonard Wood, was practicing law. And the more of that sort of thing, whether it's a lawyer or a beautician or an electrician or
teacher,
a commercial truck driver, whatever those licenses are, I want to work with you on that. In another area, I was pleased to see the department, in conjunction with the Department of Homeland Security, announce the availability of an additional 22,000 H-2B visas provided for in the 2021 omnibus bill. These H-2B visas are a lot of them in hospitality and landscaping and timber. In our state, I see those generally as jobs that actually protect the other jobs that are there, coming in, filling a part-time gap that allows the full-time Missouri resident employees to have a job that they wouldn't have if the hotel couldn't be open, or that they wouldn't have if all of the landscaping work that needs to be done at a given time couldn't be done. I don't want a detailed answer from you here today, but I would like you to commit to working with this subcommittee to guarantee that the program has sufficient returning workers to meet the seasonal needs of our small businesses and our local industries. And fishing would be one of those industries in coastal areas. Senator Mikulski and I used to work closely on this particular issue. Would you be willing to continue to work with us on this, Secretary?
Yeah, there's no question about that. And not only that, I think that this program also benefits the people that are coming here, working and taking back home the revenue back home to their families. Mm-hmm. And I think that also it's a kind of a win-win for all sides. So I certainly will continue to work with you on it.
Another area I mentioned in my opening comments was your budget request that included a $35 million set aside to serve workers in the Appalachian and lower Mississippi Delta regions. Really, we began funding this line particularly in 2018. I was the chairman of the committee at the time, but Senator Murray was the ranking member. That funding has created and will create employment opportunities by providing reemployment and training assistance in areas where they're needed. Can you speak to the success of the grants in this area, these regional commissions like the Appalachian Commission and the Delta Commission?
Certainly, I mean, there's no question about it. These grants are beneficial to those areas of the country, and you know, I hear the feedback I get from the Department of Labor, from the workforce development side of it, is that a lot of these different areas want increased grants and opportunity to access the grants. So it's beneficial, and that's why the additional revenue that I'm looking for in some of this workforce development and grant money will allow us the opportunity to make more investments in those areas.
Thank you, Secretary. Chair, I think that I'll have some more questions for the record, but I believe those are, at this point at least, all the questions I have for the hearing today.
Very good. Senator Braun.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good to see you, Mr. Secretary. Enjoyed our conversations in the past, and you know, I come from the business world, and especially small business, and I've been able to see our business grow over the years and interface with all the things you have to do with government, and I've always felt an inherent responsibility to do things right, keep your employees safe, that's part and parcel of growing an enterprise. I noticed where there's a request for a $350 million increase in enforcement funding, and would be curious, I tried to get the information, what that is on top of already. And is it related to, I know maybe during the Trump administration, which I welcomed, a lot of easing up on certain stuff that maybe was in overdrive, still acknowledging that many things need to be in place to keep a safe environment, to keep a safe workplace. Has there been an uptick in OSHA-related cases that would warrant that kind of increase that would be targeted towards enforcement?
That's a great question. The problem we have with OSHA is that we have seen an increase in cases, and we've also seen a decrease in OSHA inspectors. So I guess the answer is we're seeing increased potential problems, and we have fewer people to go out and investigate those problems. So we have a lot of our cases that are going kind of unchecked, if you will. Again, as I said earlier before you came in, Senator, I would like to get OSHA to a point where it's not just going out and saying a gotcha organization. I mentioned when I was a younger person, I worked on construction, and OSHA would come out to the job site, and not because they were out there because of an accident. They were out there to make sure that there was proper safety procedure in place in construction, which is dangerous, as you know. I would like to get OSHA back where we're doing a lot more collaboration and working with businesses to make sure we create safe work sites across America rather than having to respond to a tragedy. And we're not there yet. So the increase that we're looking for is to build back the OSHA department and build back the Department of Labor to the last 5 years. We're down the lowest amount of inspectors, I believe, in the history since the beginning of the Department of Labor. We're at the lowest number right now.
So what I'd like, and you can get that to our office, would be what the number of enforcement issues have been from 5 years ago to the present, what the funding levels were each year to make sure it might get related to that in some fashion. And then also I'd want to bring up the distinction between large business and small business. NFIB has been out there with so many stats that have shown that small businesses have been decimated, challenged with COVID, some of the things they had to do there that was on top of what they have to normally do to move forward and prosper. And I've also been an observer there. The smaller your business is, normally the more intimate that relationship is with your employees. So again, I'd like to know whether the department currently differentiates between how it looks at enforcement among big businesses versus small businesses, and to see if there is a distinction in how you carry out those functions.
Yeah, let me get back to you on that one. I don't have the answer to you, but I understand and hear what you're saying. And when you talk about small businesses, you're not necessarily talking about the 3-person mom and pop store. You're talking about the 200-person store in the
I'd give it 500 and fewer.
So let me get back to you on that, because I understand, I recognize the fact that there's a big difference between a small business and a corporation.
Especially 50 and under. But let's take the common definition, and whatever's being done in the future, I'd want to make sure it's based upon the need to do it, number one, especially in the context of scarce resources. So much of what we're doing today, and not just after the Biden administration took over, is we do it on borrowed money on anything that we do enhance in a budget. And I think that will come into question in the long run as well. So if you could get back to my office on those two particular pieces of information, I'd appreciate it.
I definitely will. And I was at the Indy 500 the other day. I went around the track. It was pretty amazing.
Yeah, and that's kind of, I guess, a big version of a small business.
Yeah,
right
it certainly
there in
is.
my home state.
It certainly is. It was interesting. It was fun.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you very much. That will end our hearing today, Mr. Secretary, and our hearings on President Biden's budget proposal for fiscal year 2022. I want to thank all of our fellow committee members for their participation. Secretary Walsh, thank you for your very thoughtful answers. I look forward to continuing to work together with you to fight for workers and build a stronger, fair economy for everyone. For any senator who wishes to ask additional questions for the record will be due Friday, July 23rd at 5 p.m. The hearing record will also remain open until then for members who wish to submit additional